The phone conversation between fantasy veterans Bob Harris and Matt Waldman is a quick and dirty rundown of players, units, or teams from Sunday's games. Feel it or fuck it is our instant verdict on the fantasy value of a player or situation, not the ability, effort, or character of the player. This is just how two old-timers in this industry talk when they got a lot to cover in a little time.
Good morning, Matt Waldman. How are you?
Well, it's good to see you. I tried to Wally Pip you with Heath Cummings, but he could only do 1 week. And
I thought for sure I was a goner after that one. It was fantastic. I'm going, this is not going to work out well for Bob Harris.
He's a good guest, but, he can't replace Bob Harris. Nobody can replace Bob Harris.
I
tried to replace Bob Harris, but I can't replace Bob Harris.
I am Bob Harris. He is Matt Waldman. You follow him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. Follow me at Football Diehard. Go to our respective websites. One's called Football Diehard. The other one's called MattWaldman.com. Matt Waldman RSP, I guess, works too. What is the difference?
The MattWaldmanRSP.com is you can find out all the work that I do that goes into the, you can get free stuff there. And then if you want to pay for the work that goes into it,
I go to that.
Go to MattWaldman.com.
I like to pay up. All right, Let's dive. Look, things are getting busy, Matt. Everybody's on the practice field. There's a lot going on. So I think I want, for this feel it or fuck it, I want to, I want to feel the context, right? Because fuck all this noise that's coming out. So we got the Jonathan Taylor situation, right? He shows up. Obviously, he would like an extension. Jahmyr hints that there's not going to be an extension. Jonathan Taylor's agent jumps in. The next thing we hear, though, is that this situation's been devolving for some number of times. He requested a trade, apparently met with Jahmyr in his Superliner luxury bus there on Saturday, and requested a trade. Well, apparently, according to Stephen Holder at ESPN, this trade was requested way sooner, and this situation's been going south for quite some time. I think Holder's term was, it's a mess. Right. And so then we hear yesterday that maybe the team is considering putting him on the non-football injury list, meaning they don't have to pay him because he has a back problem. Go with the ankle injury. He's on PUP right now, coming off ankle surgery. So a lot of moving pieces here. The sources tell both Stephen Holder and Mike Chappell, super good reporters, that the back issue, Taylor fires back on his Twitter. Nothing matters with my back. Check your sources. Well, I can probably take a guess at who the sources are here. Probably sitting in a luxury bus at the side of practice, right? So there's these situations come up, Matt, and I'll go ahead and throw in an injury situation because there are a handful of those. Kenneth Walker III has a groin injury; he's not practicing. Zach Charbonnet in Seattle has a shoulder issue. They say indefinite. We hear these things and we say, "Fuck it, I'm not drafting these guys." Is that the right approach, or is how do we put this into context as we're drafting in real time?
Yeah, I think that's one of the best questions that you can ask, really, on behalf of any fantasy GM, how to approach these things. And I think that what you have to do is I think the best thing for you to do is, one, is assess what your risk level tolerance is as a GM. If it's high risk, then that means that you're okay with taking multiple risks on players, whether it's due to boom bust profile, injury history, or holdout history, something like that. That's fine. But then I think you need to start asking yourself some questions about how many risks do you take at different points in your draft. Are you willing to, I think a high risk drafter is someone that takes maybe one risk in the first 5 rounds and maybe 1 or 2 risks in the rounds 5 to 10, and then takes high upside players regardless of what their floor is after rounds 10. Okay. And so you may, a medium risk guy probably won't take any risks in the first 5 rounds, maybe take 1 risk rounds 5 to 10, and then take more risks after that. A low risk person, maybe 1 risk in the first 10 rounds of your draft, of the types that we're talking about. So when you take a look at guys that are like Charbonnet and Walker, I think you have to look at that and say, well, if I'm going to take a risk, if I'm a high-risk guy, Charbonnet's probably not going until after round 10. Kenny McIntosh, who's getting a lot of talk now because he's the 3rd guy up, and he's had a nice camp thus far with some nice cutback runs and catches the ball well, and he's an all-around good back out of Georgia. You can probably get him also late. So again, none of that's difficult. Kenneth Walker is a risk, though. So if you're a high-risk drafter, you may have one or two more picks that you might take like him if you're going to take him. If you're a medium risk drafter, that's the one guy you're going to take a risk on. That's it. If that's the guy that you want to say, hey, I'm going.
No Brees Hall for you.
No
Javante.
That's right.
For you.
That's right. Exactly. And none of that. No Kadarius Toney.
Nah.
No, none of those guys. You're taking Kenneth Walker as your main risk. If you're low risk drafter, well, he just leaves your board at this point, and you're hoping for Charbonnet or McIntosh to be the guy,
or Dalvin Cook when he gets the call.
Right.
And we'll talk about him in a second. And look, these are the things. One of the reasons we talk about drafting as late as possible, obviously, but we don't all draft late. I've been drafting since February, and what you're doing is you're drafting in the moment with the best information you have, and you're making your decisions based on that. You explained it perfectly. I always say, you can have a risk in your roster without having a risky roster. That's the goal, right? You can mitigate the risks you take with more players you're more confident in, all of which guarantees you nothing, right? The other end of that coin is the other side of that coin is like nobody remembers who came in second place. People, nobody.
Nope.
Right. So, taking some chances often works out for the best. I mean, everyone has their own approach. You said it best. It's personal risk tolerance comes into play. So I think we're feeling this similarly, and I think it's a wise approach to take. And, there's a lane for everybody. And there's players there for, like, if you don't want to take the risk in the Kenneth Walker range, there's a bunch of players who aren't risky in that range or who don't have the perceived risk that he does going into the game.
I'm going to be covering a lot of them this week in this week's Gut Check. So I went from boom bust players last week. Now I'm going to talk about who I think are the safest players. And
I'll be looking for that. So I think, look, we'll see how these situations resolve, in particular Jonathan Taylor. I think a lot of these contentious situations, I'll say it again because I say it a lot, but it bears mentioning that the public portion of negotiations are always the most contentious portions.
Yeah.
And that's why you see Saquon Barkley, when they're talking like, oh, no, he's not showing up. He's not going to do a damn thing. And then, oh, he's got a deal, right? Because those things happen. The deals get done behind the scenes. The public negotiation portion is to get fan bases riled up in hopes that has some sway over management.
And let's make one last comment about Bob Irsay or Jimmy Irsay and Bob, because the point being is just like I talk a lot about Kyle Shanahan, not his apple not falling far from the tree with Mike when it comes to maybe thinking he's the smartest man in the room, and he probably is when it comes to scheme, but maybe not personnel in terms of handling and functional communication with individuals. That's a criticism that Kyle's starting to get that Mike definitely long deserved. Jimmy Irsay is an impulsive individual, and guess what? Bob Irsay fired Howard Schnellenberger, the great Howard Schnellenberger, in the fourth quarter of a game after browbeating him on the sideline, and Schellenberger said something sarcastic. So he called up his GM and told the team in the press box in the fourth quarter of the game that Schnellenberger's been relieved and that the GM is coming to coach the team. Jeff Saturday much type of vibes you feeling on that?
Right.
Plus he lied to John Dutton, or he lied about John Dutton during a contract negotiation, a former defensive end who wound up at the Cowboys, who was a fine player, and lied to the league about him to basically undermine negotiations. Lionel Mitchell sued him for Irsay for discrimination and wrong faith in terms of bad faith in terms of negotiations back in the day. And Lionel Mitchell was probably the Alvin Kamara of his day. As a player, and I could go on and on, but all I'm saying is that Jimmy inherited this team from Bobby, and Jimmy and Bobby seem to act a lot alike. So I think you just, like you said, the contentious part of the contract negotiations, just understand that when you have a volatile personality like Jimmy, he's going to run his mouth off like the drunken kicker that he once had.
Yes.
And then the Peyton Mannings of the world and the Chris Ballards and all those folks will probably patch things back up.
I think you were. I think you made the point with the childish versions of their surnames there, the Jimmys and Bobbies. I think that was the main point. And by the way, Jimmy texted Albert Breer and said, we ain't trading them, and not now, and not in October. And like all these stories, try to ask yourself, what are we going to be talking about in September? right?
Jonathan Taylor running for 120 yards and catching
that would be
another 30 yards worth of balls
on the range of possible
touchdowns.
outcomes. I think that's probably on the more likely end than the other possibilities. But we'll see about that.
Don't
Saquon
trade
Barkley,
Jonathan Taylor, fantasy GMs. Don't trade him.
Right. Saquon Barkley got his deal, a slight sweetening of the 1-year deal, which is all he can get now that they've missed the window to extend to a long-term contract. I think he got $11 million or something. Just a little bit over, a couple million over the tag, and makes everyone happy. And we'll see what happens next year. Is this good news for Josh Jacobs? How are you seeing the Josh Jacobs situation in Vegas?
I think the Giants, even though you can criticize some of the personnel selections they make over the years, overall they're a well-run organization. And when they aren't, they tend to get the wobbly wheel out of the way and change the tire and get things fixed. I don't know if you can characterize the Las Vegas Raiders in the same light, but I'm slightly more hopeful for Josh Jacobs. I think Josh Jacobs has a decent enough perspective and he's the type of player that wants to play, that'll override enough to go, I want to make more money. The current market's not fair. It's probably never going to be fair during my career lifetime. I'm going to say something about it, but ultimately I want to play.
Right. Fuck it. I see the path now. Saquon Barkley has shown the way to end Giants, to their credit, by the way. And they did circle back around it. It was, it was Joe Shane, the GM there, who went back to Barkley's people and got it going. And Jacobs, we'll see. I mean, I did talk to a local observer who thinks he will show up the first week of the season, who also believes that maybe Jahmyr White looks a lot more explosive this year. So maybe there's a little more complications to that. I'm feeling those complications, and I'm still, and I mean, I haven't adjusted my approach on Jacobs. I think I was dialed back on him a little bit just based on that super heavy usage, thinking it's not going to repeat. And, I'm not trying to draft last year's best team. I'm trying to draft this year's best team. So I've dialed him down a little bit, but no further because of the contract at this point. If it gets closer to the season, maybe I'll start considering that and looking at other options in that same price range. You mentioned something, the state of the running back value in general. Running backs are angry. Are you feeling they have a chance to rectify this, or fuck it, man, they're just doomed?
I think they're sort of doomed right now until the next CBA, and that's the unfortunate thing, and probably there's not much more that we probably need to say about it unless we get into the weeds with contracts, and let's not do that.
Nope, let's not do that. Javonte Williams, I mentioned before, Breece Hall, J.K. Dobbins all have ongoing issues. Javonte Williams seems to be in the best spot of these people right now. He did not open camp on the PUP list. Also, maybe had the worst of the injuries between he and Hall, had all 3 ligaments torn. Breece Hall's on the PUP. Dalvin Cook visiting the Jets and sounding like he's very enthusiastically joined them if given the opportunity. J.K. Dobbins, John Harbaugh's calling it complicated. I don't know if it's the knee or the money. I'm not sure the money is going to change much. He doesn't have a lot of game action under his belt. And I'm not sure what he's angling for here. If it's some kind of new deal, he hasn't been, given himself or had the opportunity to show a lot. Of these 3 players, which one are you feeling the most right now as you're drafting?
Honestly, I'm feeling J.K. Dobbins only from the sense that running backs know that he's good. Because when they interviewed Dalvin Cook on NFL.com, what was it, Good Morning Football?
Yep.
I saw a little segment on that.
He had some really good little complimentary words.
Yeah, and Dalvin Cook said, when all the running backs in the room saying, look, J.K. Dobbins is a good running back, but just because he didn't get, he hasn't been on the field as much because he had an injury. Dalvin Cook's like, well, I had an injury, and nobody during my career in the NFL, and when we renegotiated, they didn't weigh that in because they knew I was good. They knew what I could do, and I think that the team knows what he can do, but because of the way contracts are now, they know they have the advantage, so they're getting kind of cute or obtuse with some of this stuff, and it filters out into the media and the public. The public likes to go, well, he's unproven, because it's the fantasy public that says that. Anybody with a couple of eyes and their brain connected or disconnected from the fantasy water fountain probably understands that J.K. Dobbins is a good back when healthy, and he had one bad injury. He had a clean-up surgery and looked great after that. So
And I think this is why you're correct, right? For me, we can take this back to the top of what we're talking about with the Taylor, the agitation, the excitement, the concerns in the moment. I feel like this is the same thing with Dobbins. Whereas Javonte Williams and Breece Hall, we have a little more history backing up the fact that guys coming off, including J.K. Dobbins and his teammate Gus Edwards and many, many more. I mean, we can probably count the guys that came off torn ACLs just in general on one hand easily. I want to say Adrian Peterson. I want to say Jamal Charles. Beyond that, I don't know anybody who just came back going great guns. Who am I missing?
Yeah, exactly. And let's remember, they're anxious to have him in Todd Monken's offense, which, you know, as a pro offensive coordinator, he was the architect for Cleveland Browns offense with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Yep. And also at the University of Georgia, where he's had a number of fine running backs to work with, and he can both spread the field and get good receiving play out of these backs, as well as work the power running game. So I think you're going to see them spread the field more. That's going to benefit a guy like Dobbins, and they know this. And Dobbins, you'll look at his stats in college, and you'll go, but he wasn't much of a receiver. And you have to look at the film, folks. You have to look at the film. People. Go watch the watch the playoff game against Clemson, and watch him, you know, make plays that a running back makes out of the backfield as a receiver, and you'll understand that he's been able to do it just like Fournette was able to do it.
Right,
just
I'm
like
remember
Melvin
Fournette
Gordon was able to do
football.
it. Just like Jonathan Taylor was said that he couldn't catch the football. All those guys who actually, if you just watched enough of what they're supposed to do, it could have been 5 targets, and you'd still be like, he can catch the football. That's enough. You know, so I'm loving it.
I'm with you on J.K. Dobbins. The other two concern me. I do think, you know, Javonte Williams is going at the right price. He's just outside the running back 2 range. If you want to invest in him as a guy that maybe can help you out at the end of the season, but that's how you should view it. Breece Hall going too high for me. It's still on underdog fantasy right now. Running back is still in the top 12. Still viewed as a running back 1 or being drafted as that. If Dalvin Cook lands there, he destroys that either way.
I want the guy 1 full season removed from his ACL who psychologically trusts his leg, as opposed to the guys who may still not psychologically trust the leg even if it's healthy.
That's the right answer. And we mentioned Dalvin Cook. He's going to land somewhere. Miami's still in the opening. Patriots have been mentioned. Ezekiel Elliott visited there. Fournette has visited there. I think those two seem like kind of Patriot-type moves. Yeah. See if you're with me on this one. Kareem Hunt. Are you feeling him as the guy that's going to come out of nowhere and destroy someone's fantasy value?
Oh, without a doubt. He's probably the best of the running backs other than Cook that are available on the market right now.
He worries me.
And he would,
been very quiet.
I've been hoping, to be honest, like I'm telling you right now, it probably feeds into one of our topics that I know we were going to discuss is Vikings' faith in Alexander Mattison, because if there's a back who's played in a system similar to that, it would be Kareem Hunt. And if Mattison doesn't look great or the depth doesn't look strong, and I don't think it is as strong as they would like it to be, Kareem Hunt could just totally wreck that scenario.
Well, let's go to that, because we were going to get to that. Vikings faith in Alexander Mattison. Are you feeling that? I was feeling it until Ben Gessling wrote an article in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune in which he prominently mentioned all 3 the guys behind him on the depth chart, Ty Chandler, Kene Nwangwu, and Dwayne McBride, as possibly having roles. I'm thinking, this is a team that only threw the ball at 35% of the time last year. If we're going to start dividing that pie, I don't know if we're going to get what we expect out of Alexander Mattison. If they added a key piece like a Kareem Hunt. By the way, Drew Petzing was the coordinator, was an offensive coach in Cleveland in the past. He's now the offensive coordinator in Arizona. My James Conner shares are very nervous right now.
There you go.
I'll just say that.
Yeah, and there's a Kareem Hunt-esque back there that I compared in the RSP to one Keontae Ingram, so who can catch. But I'll say this. Dalvin Cook, in that same interview, when they asked him about his departure from the Vikings, he said it was all good, lots of respect, but you can see the writing on the wall that they're going to veer away from wanting to hand the ball off as much. They're going to throw the ball a lot more, and they just didn't see me in their plans. Now, Alexander Mattison can catch the football, but so can Ty Chandler. And Kene Nwangwu is a nice speedster. Maybe if they get him out in the space, that might work out too. And then there's this Dwayne McBride kid that everybody seems to be excited about, but I'm still waiting for him to hold on to the football and get some fundamental things in order there. That said, I think that Mattison still is someone that you want to acquire if you can get him outside of I'm trying to remember what his ADP is, but I'd say if you can get him outside of the 6th round, if you can get him in round 7 or 8, I think that's a nice deal. You might not be able to get him there. He might be a 5th or 6th round pick. If you do like the upside down drafting 0 RB type of thing, then yeah, maybe he's your first back that you take.
Just so you know, on Underdog Fantasy, he's jumped up to running back 18, so he's going in the 5th round.
Yeah, 5th round for him, not bad. Just because you're getting a block of guys
ahead of J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, see, that's the thing.
Ahead of Miles Sanders, ahead of Cam Akers, ahead of Dameon Pierce.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting on that end, and I think that's looking at last year's production and pasting that in. Mattison himself, if Mattison were playing for the Cleveland Browns,
right,
he'd be running back. He might be running back, 12 instead of running back 18. But on this offense and what they're going to do, they're looking for someone to provide an addition to Mattison because Mattison doesn't have top end speed. They're looking for someone who can be that big play complement for him. But I think that he gives you kind of what you've seen from Elliott while people were complaining about him, but before the wheels supposedly fell off last year. So I wouldn't even, so I look at Mattison as you're probably getting a low end running back too, and that's fine. What you see is what you get.
All right, I kind of agree with that. I have some shares. I'm not out there, like adjusting my strategies to somehow include Alexander Mattison again. I mean, if they throw the ball a lot in Minnesota, you'll be surprised to learn they're built to pass. They got a lot of targets. Okay, Joe Burrow injured the calf muscle. I feel like we could have had this conversation. Well, actually, we could have had this conversation each of the last 2 years when he missed like the entirety of training camp coming off an ACL in 2021, having to undergo an appendectomy last year. Didn't seem to slow him a lot once the regular season hit. Calf strains can be tricky though, Matt. So I don't know where you had him ranked. I've kind of had him at 4. I think the ADP has had him at 4. I've already seen in drafts since then that he's fallen down below Lamar Jackson, below Justin Fields in some of these drafts that I've been doing in real time. Are you moving him at all?
No, I think he's 3 or 4 for me, and I'm more than fine with keeping him that way for the reasons that you stated in terms of what happened in the past and how his production fared. So
and
I'm
also
good.
Based on that high-end receiving core he has, and also Joe Mixon's back. So just like let me throw this out at you. Are you feeling it? Are you feeling like if you're a swing for the fence player? Are you feeling that Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields are guys that have quarterback 1 seasons in them this year?
Much more Lamar Jackson than Justin Fields. But Justin Fields, I think, has low-end quarterback 1, maybe mid-range. But I think Lamar Jackson has top 3 quarterback upside. So I would give
We like the Munkin.
Yeah, I like the Munkin. I like the Beckham. I like the Zay Flowers. There's that Bateman kid if they needed him too. Oh yeah, there's Mark Andrews, the leading receiver on the team, and the other 2 tight ends. And I say the other 2 because people forget about Charlie Kolar who's having a nice camp too. So they're loaded in terms of pass catchers.
Used a lot of 2 tight end personnel in Georgia, like a predominant to 12 personnel. So Deebo Samuel, best shape of his life, Matt Waldman. It's best shape of his life season in general. How do you feel? Like, feel or fuck best shape of his life?
Fuck it, in the sense that like his baseline level of shape was good enough,
right?
So
how much better could it be?
Yeah. Now, if you said to me, Deebo Samuel has spent endless hours working on press release coverage, and he's like dominating in camp in against press coverage in a way that he never has, that I would take notice on. But some of these guys, it's like, look, I don't need you to win fitness pageants. What I really need is you have the baseline stuff, and are you working on your game? Like, say, Evan Ingram with Coach Lieberman last year to get that contract, where now he's using his hands better, or Darius Slayton using his hands better to catch a football.
Right.
That's more important to me.
Also, I would like to be informed if we have WSOHL, worst shape of his life. That might be more.
Lendale White, I think, was probably pretty good at that. So was Gary Brown, if you remember. If you're an old folk like us, Gary Brown, who once weighed almost 300 pounds and then shifted back down, he was kind of a Saquon Barkley-like runner without the juice, you know?
Yeah. Brock Purdy is on schedule. Feeling him locked in as the starter week 1.
Absolutely. That's Mike, that's Kyle Shanahan's automaton, right there. And no offense to Purdy, who's a fine young player, but yeah, he's the guy who's going to run the scheme exactly as ordered.
Yes, and by the way, to great end last season, according to the win-loss record during that period. So, and also the fantasy production was not horrible for him or the pieces around him. Last one on San Francisco, wide back role. Has it gone the way of the dodo with Christian McCaffrey there for Deebo Samuel?
For Deebo getting the running back role? Yep. Yeah, I think it's gone. I think he asked for it to be gone, and he'll have small cameo appearances at best.
Mike Tomlin thinks the Steelers need to get more out of Kenny Pickett. Second-year quarterbacks, someone's going to break out. Are you feeling Kenny Pickett as the potential breakout candidate at the quarterback position this year?
I think it's possible. I don't know if I'd say probable. I think low.
Who's more probable? Howell, Ritter.
I would say, out of all those guys, I'll go. Now that I've climbed up off the raft and see what's out there in the ocean, I'm going to swim back to the Kenny Pickett raft there and hold on to the handle. Yeah, we'll say Kenny Pickett.
All right, George Pickens, breakout coming, feeling it.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. I think that he's going to be the second. He's going to be one of the top 2 leading receivers in volume, and I'm not sure Deontay Johnson will be the other one. I'm starting to like what I see from the old man Allen Robinson. Maybe Allen Robinson's a little bit more. He's not overtaken Deontay Johnson for me yet in my projections, but I gave him some significantly more volume after what I'm hearing and seeing about him.
I'm hearing and seeing those same things, and yet I find and I'm someone who is like totally feeling the cheapest piece of any situation.
And you still feel like you're Charlie
like,
Brown going, I don't want to kick that football. Yeah.
Well, the price is right. So there will be some shares before the end of best ball drafts are over for me. Stefon Diggs says all is well in Buffalo. Are you feeling it?
Yeah.
I think this goes back to our first question, right? Like, what are we going to be talking about in September?
Listen, guys are guys, right? Like, guys can have, knockdown, drag-out arguments, and everything's well at the end of the day. I had a boss once who got angry at a situation. It wasn't my fault, but I happened to be the one that had to be caught up in the situation with dealing with people. And he threw a wok across the kitchen, and it clanged off the other side of the wall, and he was yelling and screaming, and I was yelling at him, and at the end of the shift, we each sat down on a stoop, and he handed me a beer, clinked bottles, and all was forgotten, Right. And I think this is what happens is with more magnified media and bigger egos.
Like, football is an emotional game, right? You're in the heat of the moment. It's a physical, violent sport, and things are going on, and at any given time, the frustrations mount and people's tempers boil over. It would be unusual if they did not.
Yeah.
I would say. So I'm with you there, Stefon Diggs. I think Stefon Diggs is the illustration of what we were talking about at the top. What are we going to be talking about in September about all these super contentious situations where things have boiled over at the moment? They'll probably be smoothed over. That is like going to be the
130 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Right.
Yeah.
That's going to be the overwhelming majority of cases. It's not going to be 100% of cases. We can go back and Le'Veon Bell showed us that there are alternative universes out there. I think he wishes he had never stepped into that alternative universe. Melvin Gordon, right? So it does happen, but it is not the rule. It's the exception. So I was talking to a local beat writer, Johnny Venerable in Arizona. this weekend, and he seems really keen on Kyler Murray. And okay, I mean, I get it, and they did pay him. I think, and I just, are you feeling this offense? How much better is this offense with Kyler Murray than it is without him?
I want proof. So,
I
where I stand right now, sarcastically, I'd say not that much. But to be honest, the potential for this offense to be much better is far higher with Kyler Murray than it is without him. The reality of this offense with Kyler Murray is likely to be not as much better than what you actually expect than with a guy like Colt McCoy, because one player, Colt McCoy, is actually better at keeping things on schedule, better at managing a pocket, better at taking responsibility for his mistakes, and better at not basically creating rapport and communication issues, and actually allowing players to continue with their routes and their offensive linemen to do their jobs without destroying all of that in the name of your vain athletic ability.
Let me put a fine point on this. Matt Waldman totally feeling Colt McCoy's old man superpowers. Well done, Matt Waldman.
Hey, listen, I have my AARP card now, so Colt's not that far away.
Rookie quarterback check. Let's just do a heat check here. Anthony Richardson rave review is going to miss a day or two of practice. Had to have a little procedure done to fix his septum. Bryce Young officially quarterback 1 in Carolina. CJ Stroud officially competing, unofficially not competing at all. On track to be the starter. According to Aaron Wilson, who covers that team on a daily basis, told me that this week. Just are feeling where these guys are at is about where you expected to be at this point. Anything that's causing you consternation?
No, because all of them are prepared. All of them have, have started to get people to on the team to like him in the locker room. They're doing all the things that they need to do in the process to get ready. And then when the game starts, the real action starts, that's when you're going to see the ups and the downs. And that's what we should expect, is the ups and downs with these players this year. So as long as they're not woefully underprepared, or the coaches is like doing the Jerry Glanville, it's going to take a charter plane to go down for me to ever start Brett Favre, then then in those situations, outside of those situations, these guys are on schedule.
Right, I'm totally with you. Let's go to the rave review department here, and I picked 3 guys, 2 of them for which they are the nails to my hammer. I am the hammer, they are my nails, and one that might be yours. Jahmyr Gibbs drawing rave reviews, Darren Waller lustrous reviews, and Dalton Kincaid getting great reviews. How over the top are they? How over the top are you feeling them to be? Or fuck it, they're totally true. And all my love for Jahmyr Gibbs and Darren Waller is going to be repaid handsomely.
I feel like Gibbs is probably on point, as long as the over the top isn't he's Marshall Faulk. He's not. Right. He's between 2 Faulks, as I keep saying over and over again. But he's a good player who's going to probably do better than
Come on, closer to Marshall
Swift.
Than Kevin, though.
Yes, he is. But Kevin was underrated. But but I'll say this: he's going to do. I think he'll do at least as well as DeAndre Swift, if not better, in the rushing column and in the red zone. He's a more versatile. He's what they wanted DeAndre Swift to be, and that's why they got rid of him. So Waller, I'm not feeling that as much. Only because it's know
man
who
among
Waller.
Boy level talk, right?
Yeah,
it's like he's playing with a children's team out there. He's standing out so much.
We know who he is. Yeah, we know who he is already. It's about whether he can stay healthy. And when it was funny that Sigmund Bloom had a tweet that he copied and quoted that said, basically the tweet was about how they had to take Waller out of the practice because they needed Daniel Jones to throw the ball to somebody else. And that's the thing. I mean, to me, Waller's the guy that everyone's going to be paying attention to. He's good enough to be that primary guy, but can he play a full season? That's the biggest question about him. Kincaid, I'm totally feeling that. And I just look at it this way. Gibbs, you've got to take in the first 3 to 4 rounds.
Definitely, if you're drafting with me, definitely in the first 3.
Yeah, Yeah, maybe it's probably going to be higher by the time the preseason rolls around,
Certainly.
and he has a couple of highlight plays, and he's going to wind up being taken at the end of the first round or mid-second. So you're already paying the premium for him. Waller, you've got to pay a premium for the most part, and hope he can stay healthy. And then Kincaid, you're not paying the premium for. He's barely even listed as a tight end 1, and people are like, well, no, I hear this over and over again. History says that you're just never going to be, you're going to be productive that way. Listen, I think I've been the guy saying that, recording for year after year after year after year. So if I'm the guy telling you that you need to ignore that shit and you need to take this guy at the value that he is right now, because he's not a tight end. He's listed as one. He's getting paid as one. But in this offense, he's a wide fucking receiver. He's a wide receiver. Draft him right now, because you're going to get a guy who is going to be that second player to Stefon Diggs who can win one-on-one. Gabriel Davis can't do it. James Cook only does it in a limited level within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, or a wheel route, which happens like 3 times a year. Khalil Shakir drops too many passes right now in camp and doesn't have that contested catch ability to the level that Kincaid does. And Kincaid's going to be moved around everywhere. And that's why they said we had a vision for him. When Ken Dorsey said we had a vision for him, that vision started before the draft, after they finalized their board and decided, we want Dalton Kincaid, and if he doesn't fall to us, we're trading out of the first round. In a pretty good draft, we're trading out of the first round because that's the guy we want. That tells me they had a plan for him, and they've been like, we don't want to rush that plan. We want to make sure he gets the fundamentals down. What it basically is we need him to be able to look like a tight end in 2 tight end sets as the backside blocker, and make sure he can at least do that and run some routes in the middle of the field before we start splitting them out as a mismatch against a whole bunch of people, outside and in the slot. And that's common.
Talk about Dalton Kincaid like I talk about Mike Gesicki, who is far cheaper, by the way, people. And there is a path.
Listen, they're making them watch Aaron Hernandez and Gronkowski tape in New England. All that is wistful, nostalgia, because Mike Gesicki to either one of those 2 players is basically like saying Weird Al Yankovic to Beethoven. Okay?
But also, compared to the rest of the receiving core, he is like those guys.
You're right, because they can't draft wide receivers worth of shit.
That's the whole argument. Also, going back to what you said about Kincaid being what they want, I'm going to say the same thing clearly about Gibbs. If you saw the videos floating around on Twitter, looked like they were ready to take him at 6, right? I mean, seriously, ahead of Bijan, apparently. He seemed to be their guy. Also, I feel like they feel the same about Sam Laporta, and the glowing reports on Laporta have been very similar, and with Jameson Williams out early in the season.
It was Kincaid and Laporta in the RSP,
right.
1-2.
Yep.
And I think both those guys have a shot to be starters this year. Kincaid, to me, has the shot where it may not be probable, but it's highly possible, the slight difference there, of being a top 3 guy this year.
I'm with you. Training camp fights. It's that time of year. Travis Kelce's been throwing hands. Stop it, Travis. Says he's going to drop it. Jonathan Gannon, to his credit, he has a non-negotiable. We don't do that here, because you do that in a game, you get thrown out of the game. We talked about tempers boiling over, issues like this. Matt Waldman, how excited are you for training camp fights this time of year, especially when 2 teams are practicing together?
Well, there's this. I like training camp fights for one reason. It's a stupidity factor thing. If the guy takes his helmet off in a training camp fight,
I'll never draft him.
He's an idiot. I'm not drafting that dude. That's number 1 right there. I'm not drafting him, or I'm thinking this dude is crazy. I am totally drafting him. It depends on the position that he plays. So we'll put it that way.
It's probably not actually part of our draft strategy, people. We're kind of just having a little fun with it, but It is something you're going to see a lot of coming up for the reasons outlined above. Football being the emotional sport, violent, physical, frustrating, all those things. Tempers will boil over, including those of Travis Kelce, and apparently none of the Cardinals will get in any fights. And so we'll finish today off with the best fight of all, a verbal back and forth going on. So Sean Payton, and I thought it was interesting the way the article framed it. Jarrett Bell from USA Today walked into Sean Payton's office, and Sean Payton said, I got to tell you something. Not like, hey, Sean, tell me this. It was like, right. Sean Payton, I want to tell you something. Nathaniel Hackett, the worst coach ever to live, the worst job in the NFL history. First of all, was Payton wrong in his assessment?
I don't have the expertise of Sean Payton to be able to do all that, but it was pretty bad. I'll just say it was pretty bad. And Payton being the no holds barred kind of like, I don't give a fuck what I'm gonna tell you what I think overall. It must have been pretty bad for him to come out and violate the fraternity of former NFL coaches like that.
I think, and so Aaron Rodgers, by the way, isn't just, coached by Nathaniel Hackett. He loves Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, they are tight as tight can be, have been since their days together. It's his favorite coach of all times. And to his credit, he came out and said, man, that was really unprofessional, Sean Payton, to do that. Keep your coach's name out of my mouth. See you week 5, all those kind of things. And like, no issues with that. But once it came out, and then, Rodgers said, Payton apologized. Are you feeling that apology? Or fuck it, man. Once you put it out there, just roll with it, baby.
I think from the standpoint of just like trash talking, no, I think he probably should have apologized. And I'll say it like this. I know, Bob. I know you're hating life that I'm saying that, but I look at it this way. He realizes that it's a very tough profession to get into. It's very tough to be able to sustain any work as a coach, and that Peyton's been probably had his moments where people said, you're a fucking idiot. How'd you ever become a coach in the first place? I mean, in fact, wasn't he getting his ass whooped on suspension by basically Pop Warner coaches until he learned how to adopt to basically a wishbone or triple option system, because he was getting his ass whooped, not knowing basically the level of football that he was playing at. The level of football at Pop Warner was above him, So I think he probably remembered that moment and said, we're all fucking idiots from one moment to the next. We all have those idiot moments. Maybe I should apologize. He did a rotten job. I didn't need to tell everybody that. Everybody in Denver already knew that.
Right.
His
actions came in and said that as well. When he came in like, hey, Russell Wilson, your support crew, fuck them. Get them out of here, man. Yeah. And that suite of offices you have, here, you can have a little film closet here. Jump in there and start
You're
studying.
Not Peyton Manning, okay?
Right, you're not Peyton Manning.
Exactly. And the last thing I'll say this just about Rodgers is, and Rodgers is going to stand up for his friend. That's the thing that you have. That's the thing you do. You stand up for your friends and family, and Rodgers did that. So it made sense.
I stand up for you, Matt Waldman, every time you say stupid shit. I say, hey, look, man, it happened. Everybody has their moments.
Appreciate that greatly, Bob. I really do. I will make sure next time that you're out that when the people who come in that I have tried to replace you badmouth you, I'll stand up for you as well.
I do appreciate that. I love you. Let's do it again next week.
Bye.
Bye.